Good afternoon, Mike.
Hello, Peter.
Um, I've actually, dare I say, I've forgotten where we were last time, but that doesn't matter. Um, it's been probably over a week since I last talked to you, and during that time, we've sort of thought about what we'd like to talk about. And this talk, we'd like to focus on that scary word, which is a sort of, I don't know, it's a wonderful word, Laban. And when I first assisted you, we did a lot of Larban stuff, and I've used it a lot in my teaching and directing. And I think, like you, I find it an absolutely wonderful tool and a wonderful way of releasing human beings from their own, as it were, their own
Yeah,
physical constructs.
yes, their own, yes, exactly, from their own habits and patterns.
Yeah.
Uh, Absolutely.
So start to give us some idea of what this thing is.
All right. Well, Laban efforts are the most important technique I use for helping actors to create character. That's what I originally thought, found them useful for, but they do have many other reasons at all. They're actually helping you with the way you live. Uh, I should give a little sort of brief biography of Rudolph Larban. He was born in 1887 in, I think, what was then Hungary, but now is Bratislava. Um, he worked all over the place. He moved all the time. He was in Ancona in Italy. He worked in Germany. He worked I think, in the Netherlands. He traveled around and set up groups and wrote a lot of books all about movement. And it was his lifetime work. He actually worked for the Nazis, but he escaped in 1938, came to England, and he spent the rest of his life here. And he did a lot of work at Dartington College, which was the sort of arts training school in the southwest. And he's not more widely known, although he's done so much work, and it's difficult to know why, because he was very productive and he explored all sorts of things apart from choreographing shows and teaching dance and creating a notation for dancers called Larban notation. He also did time and work studies in factories about how to use your body efficiently. And in the middle of all this work in his writings, there's a little section which I focused on uh, and which I want to talk about. I don't want it to get too technical, so I will keep it simple and people can, look it up for themselves.
Mhm.
And uh, it's we call them Laban Efforts. And I was looking in a book about him today, and he wrote a whole book called Effort, and he was always talking about what sort of effort we make and what's the most efficient way of making the necessary effort when we're working, you know. Um, so first of all, I read somewhere that he said, movement is the way in which we relate to life, to the world. And I immediately liked that. And the beautiful thing about Laban, it is not just physical work. When you use Laban, by using your body, it changes your way of thinking, your mind, and it changes your emotion, which actually all movement should do in some way because we are holistic. And as I've said several times during these chats, I'm more and more convinced that the body is far more important than we've ever given it credit for actors. And it's the first port of call for actors to have a wonderful, sensitive, flexible body. So I first found out about this by attending a workshop that was invited to a rep production I was doing by a lovely man called Philip Headley, who was running Lincoln Rep. And for a while he ran in Theatre Royal East 15. And he was a devotee of Larban and Joan Littlewood and so forth. Anyway, and the teacher got us to work on the Larban, and immediately it rang bells for me. And I have been using it with greater knowledge and understanding ever since. And that was sort of 1967 to now, so it's a lot of time. And every time I use them, I discover more and more about them. Now, I have to say, I may have veered away from some of his original ideas, but they do work, they do make sense, and they keep proving themselves doing. And so here we go. He analyzed movement as having three basic qualities. Okay. And I have to translate these because words are confusing. You were either light or strong. He used strong instead of heavy because heavy has a very negative connotation. It's bad energy. Yeah. Light, for me, means that you move and do things with total ease, without effort. There's no barrier, there's no obstacle, there's no resistance. You are very easy in what you do. So I would say light means with ease. When you're strong, it means that you have the capacity to overcome resistance, obstacles, blocks. Okay. It doesn't mean to say you're in that state all the time, but you can do it in varying degrees. And it requires a certain amount of energy, which you don't use in the same way when you're light. Okay. So that's the category which is called weight. Okay. Now, the other pair are direct and flexible. Now, and this is where I may veer off from him, but psychologically it comes to the same thing. Direct and flexible have to do with space. Okay. Direct means I know what I'm doing, I know who I am, I know where I am, I know where I'm going, I'm full of purpose, and I impose myself on the world. I put out, I give out, right? Okay? I'm in charge and very focused. I can see around me 360 degrees. I'm very present and direct and full of purpose. When I'm flexible, it means that I'm open to receive. When I'm direct, I'm giving. When I'm flexible, I'm receiving. I'm allowing things in. I'm allowing myself to be affected by my feelings, thoughts, moods, other people, memories, the weather, anything outside me or inside me which takes over, and I go with it. Okay? It means I'm vulnerable and open to be changed. Okay? And then the final trio is to do with time. And you're either sudden or broken or quick, or you're sustained. Sustained means that your movement is flowing, it's continuous, it's like a lovely river, without any wind, just flowing very nicely, nothing changes. And the image I often give people I'm working with, if you can imagine an underwater plant being washed by under tides, and it's just sort of swaying. And the feeling of that, it's slower rather than faster, and everything is rounder and circular and softer. And so the movement tends to be the longest way round rather than the shortest. The opposite of that is broken, which means that I'm renewing my energy all the time. I'm broken, quick, sudden. If you're dancing, if you're playing any game, soccer or tennis, you're broken. You're renewing your energy. And that's quicker. Doesn't mean you have to be fast or slow, but those are those three ingredients. He also talks about a fourth ingredient, which I don't discuss, called flow. The flow of the movement, and it can either be bound or free. Bound, he describes as being rather sticky and viscous and sort of holding you, and free means that it sort of goes around. But I think that state happens anyway. Now, if you put those three pairs of combinations together, you get 8 efforts, 8 archetypes, which are called variously floating, dabbing, flicking, gliding, thrusting, ringing, and so forth. Okay. And so if I am light and direct and sustained, and if I'm flowing with ease and totally focused, I'm called what is gliding. Now, if I can put those combinations together inside my body, okay, and I am in a gliding state, I feel very much in control, without effort. I feel I have a lot of status. I can be cool or I can be warm. I can be a little bit snobbish and reserved, or I can be very caring and like a very good doctor or a therapist who's helping you or an advisor. Yeah. But everything's done with ease, focus, and authority. Okay. The opposite of that is somebody called a slasher. And they are broken, strong, and flexible. And they're all over the place. And it's a very violent movement. And it tends to be quite dangerous because whereas with gliding, I have total control, with slashing, I have none. The brain doesn't work at all. And all these things have their good and bad sides. You mustn't say one is better than the other. We are made up potentially of all 8 archetypes, and the ideal human being and the ideal actor should be master of all and be able to move with ease whichever way life requires them or a role requires them to go. So and I'm giving you very simplistic illustrations because they have all sorts of subtleties and nuances. And if when you're gliding, you emphasize the sustained quality more than the control direct, you know, yeah, it'll give a slightly different shift, so you can play with them. It's not a box that you have to fit yourself into. It's a toolkit which you can use, but you have to learn them and you have to get them in touch with your body, and you've got to allow them, you've got to let yourself feel what they're doing. So you really have to commit yourself to them, your movement. You see, I can do something to you like that, and it'll mean nothing because I'm doing it technically, but I'm not really committed to it. There's no energy behind it. But if I go that, immediately I feel I'm accusing you of something. And although we have our own normal center, which is down in our gut, or it's a couple of inches below the belly button, I think, something like that. Yeah. You try imaginatively give each of these Laban efforts a center. So a floater would be up there. It's somebody who is sort of not fleshy, is very spiritual, dreamy, thoughtful, curious, open to life, wonderment. Yes, it's all the finer feelings and thought, but it's nothing to do with passion. Okay, if I do gliding, it's actually the base of the sternum there. And I'm very open, I'm very presented because I'm very confident, I'm easy. If I'm a slasher, it's down in the bowels and the genitals and the hips. It's a very visceral place. But these have to be worked on. You have to feel them to experience them. And then you can do all sorts of things. You can have an inner Larban and an outer Larban. And the inner Larban is probably your real self, or something that consciously or subconsciously you don't want other people to see. And the outer Larban is how you want to present yourself or how you'd like people to see you. And of course, we do that all the time. Everything about Larban is natural and human. It's not artificial at all. So that is really it. It is wonderful for character, because look, every human being is capable of every effort, all 8 efforts, but we all tend to sort of be comfortable in 1 or 2. And it's quite good to see what's the default effort of this character. It means that when all things come, all things being equal, that's where the character goes. Of course, they can move around, but that's their sort of emotional Laban center, wherever it is. Yeah. If I'm a very dreamy, thoughtful person, I like to be up there, and occasionally I have to sort of get focused and come down from there, but that's really where I want to be. Yeah. So forth. Okay. So they're wonderful for character. They've even, I found, solved a scene. If you say to somebody, you'll play this scene more, you're not being light enough, you're being too strong. Suddenly, the scene makes sense. They may have been playing their objectives and doing all the right things, but their body's not in the right state.
Yeah.
So that, and it's wonderful for breaking patterns, for getting actors, as you've noticed and said, to break patterns and habits, because actors get locked into a very small repertoire of what they can do. Very few have a range of characters. As I think I've said, maybe I do say it quite a lot generally, most actors are rather uninteresting after you've seen them a couple of times, because you start to know exactly what they'll do, how they'll do it.
Yeah.
And they never surprise you. So you can almost visualize the performance before you see it. Now, you might want to see it again because you like what they do, but then that becomes about personality, not seeing an actor create a character. And so you want to break this pattern, because often actors think they're changing because they're working so much in their heads, but they're not using their bodies. So although they think they're doing something, they're actually not. So, and also in life, it makes you very aware of yourself, how you use space, how you use weight, how you use time. Am I a quick person? Could I be far more broken? Do I need to be broken here? Or shall I just be more sustained? You know, as a director, I sit in rehearsals, and without thinking about it technically, I suddenly, I feel I better use a bit more energy. And then, oh, today I must be very calm. And if I want to get snappy, it's not the time, so I'm going to be very calm. So, and also for work, you know, people who do very strong physical labor, if they do their job well, they know exactly how to use their muscles, how fast or how slow to go, and how much pressure. If they strain, they're going to damage themselves. So they can be incredibly economical with what they do, because they've learned this is the most efficient way. Yeah.
What? I mean, that's interesting. You say that about labor, because obviously, you couldn't be a a floater if you were working on a building site, because
It's dangerous.
but you said, let's not give value judgments or judge.
No, because they all have their good points.
Well,
You know,
how?
a labourer doesn't have to be in a labouring state all day long. That's their job. You know, he might want to go down to the pub and have a relaxation and drink a pint and have a little bit of a gossip. And
But Mike, what I wanted to ask you is, where is the positive side of slasher? Of
slashing is, if you've been really pressured all week and you think, fuck it, I'm going to have a wild weekend, I'm going to get roaring drunk and have a good time, and you go out and you rave and you just throw yourself around, that's very pleasurable. Or people who love going on all those crazy rides and fun fairs, you know, you get and they scream. That's the positive side, but it is exhausting and it can be dangerous because you're not in control. But that's very pleasurable, and a little of that is quite good to let go.
Yeah, okay, all right, that's interesting.
Yeah. No, you mustn't give them value judgments because they all have their purpose. You know, or their uses or their expressiveness, shall we say?
Now you're a teacher listening to this, or a director, and this is how I would have worked it. I would have started to explain it. Then I would have suggested that we try this particular combination, dabber or whatever it might be. But I wouldn't say this is a dabber.
No.
I would just let them experience it first, and then talk about
I'm
it.
just telling you now because I'm not.
Yeah.
I mean, because how I work is that first of all, I spend a couple of days just exploring the individual ingredients of the three pairs. You know, really being light, just be light. You know, and then you have to say, look, you defy gravity. Imagine that you have wings on your shoulders, or you're buoyed up by balloons, and you're slightly off the ground. You levitate. You know, you're free of gravity. You know, and I would coach, and some people find it very difficult. They do a lot of looking up, but they don't have a feeling of floating. And then I'd work on strong, you know, sort of grounding them. And then I'd say, okay, I want you to be very sustained. Watch that, you know. And if you're going to move across the floor, you can't be jerky. So it's almost got to be invisible, the change of weight from one foot to the other. So you're very smooth. Yes, you're flowing the whole time, continue. And I would work on those and then say, okay, now let's start putting them together.
Right. Okay.
And I might put two together and try that, and then three, and then give them a name afterwards, and then talk about the sort of bottom line, basic sort of psychological thing. What I would say to the actors, let's say I give them light, uh, flexible, sustained, which is the floating. Okay, I let them do it. And then I would ask them, when are you like this? Who might be like this a lot? You know, these are sort of generalizations. And I sometimes manage to prize things that, oh, when I'm high, when I'm drunk, yes. Okay, when I'm dreamy, okay, good. When I'm in love, yeah. I float around all day in a sort of
Mm.
dream. When I've often suggested this, when you come upon a beautiful view, suddenly you go down to the sea and you just watch, and somehow you're overcome by the beauty and the expanse of a mountain view or open, and you feel like a little tiny part of something else, and you're that's also a form of floating. So there's many variations. It can, on the negative side, it could be an avoidance. I don't want to listen to you. So you're trying to get my attention, Peter. I'm saying, oh, Peter, that's very interesting. I had an aunt like that. You'd say, look, Mitzi, you've got to pull yourself together, blah, blah. And you could see her just not wanting to listen. And she'd go into denial and float away. It's a bit Scarlett O'Hara from Gone in the Wind. Think about that tomorrow. So it's a sort of, so you have to find out how all that works.
Mike, there's one other thing that I want to ask you, and I'm worried that you're going to disappoint me here, but
Ooh,
uh,
surely
you've
not.
not talked about employing or using an abstract voice in relation to these different states. Doesn't mean that you have to have language, but
No, no, no. No, sometimes I don't always do it. I do forget. But sometimes I say make a sound. Just allow yourself to see what sort of sound you make when you're doing it, when you're into it. Um, it tends to be a bit naff because people are a little bit inhibited about using their voices. But I do, but then when I'm working with them later on, I will say, okay, but your voice is down, if you want to be all of a piece. And of course, at the beginning, I'm asking them to go to the extreme of this particular effort to really feel it, go as far as you can in that direction. But then, of course, you may not function at that extremity all the time. Do you see what? I mean, if I really floated away, I just be very spaced out. And you could hardly communicate with me, because I'd just be taking anyway. So all I'm trying to do with this is to describe how useful it is, and I have never discovered anything or any experience or psychological state that doesn't fit into one or other of these 8 archetypes.
and this is a rather sort of random question, but is there any sense of gender bias in these?
Yes, I mean there was, and there probably still is, although it's probably not seemly to discuss that sort of thing anymore. There is, yes, women on the whole, particularly young women, prefer to be light than strong because that's what girls are. I mean, it doesn't apply, and a lot of feminists would just dismiss this, but yeah, um, I think women are probably more sustained than men. They flow more. I notice in rehearsals they endure more. They have more stamina than men in the long term. You know, um, it's because at some level they're emotionally freer and can go, whereas men get impatient and but these are generalizations, but there is a sort of gender difference. I mean, eventually that bit might be wiped out totally. And also women by instinct and ability have a capacity to be more caring, more loving, to sort of, to be, sustained and direct and strong in a sort of pressing, in a light pressing way to look after you and take care of you and so forth. Do you see, you know, whenever I see a woman doctor, they're always much more sympathetic than the men. In a way, the words they use and the concern. It's interesting. I mean, these may be cultural stereotypes that will die, you know, but you know, for what it's worth, you can notice this.
Okay.
And of course, women, you know, unless they work out like mad, um, their bodies aren't as capable of such strength as men. They have less, they can't run as fast, most of them. You know, there are exceptions, of course, and you can train. But basically, I mean, that's how this gender sort of differentiation occurred. That, you know, in cave dwellers or hunter-gatherers, the most obvious people to go off hunting were men because they ran faster, they were stronger. And the women to do the sort of nurturing of gardens and children because they were 9 months of for 9 months they were carrying a child and having to nurture and bring it up. And that division of labor probably seemed very sensible and very egalitarian. But of course, history and, you know, centuries have changed that, and they've reinforced certain prejudices, and, you know, and now we're trying to break out of centuries of habit.
Mm. Yeah.
You know, so it's a difficult and complicated thing. But I wouldn't think, I mean, you can observe it if you have yes, you see, I think a lot of people who don't like to be aggressive will tend to try to be light. They will feel uncomfortable being strong because that means I've got to be ready to fight. And that could be difficult for both genders, you know. And it's overcoming that because the capacity for all these things are inside us. Of course, the way we've been brought up has, you know, pushed us in certain directions where we have our comfort zone, but inside us there are these potentials.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
I mean, now I don't want to talk anymore about the technicalities because it can get quite complicated. And I have to say that all the books I've read about Laban and by Laban are very difficult to read because at the same time, he seems to be saying things which are very obvious. And at the same time, they're obscure and confusing. And also, he was very technical and he drew lots of sort of diagrams of where different efforts were in space. He invented a sort of cube that the human was in, and floating was up there and something was over there and that was down there. And I found it got very technical and very intellectual and not helpful. You know, I've got a little library of his books on him, about him and so forth. And I've never been able to read one all the way through. And you know, so that may be one of the reasons he's not more well known, because he worked with, you know, with lots of movement teachers. I mean, there are schools, you know, Larban, you know, movement dance schools. They teach dance. And he worked with a lot of choreographers. He was very influential. And those choreographers carried his work on with other choreographers as a tradition. So he had a lot of influence on lots of people. And there are some actors now who very much believe in him and use him, you know. But
well, I suppose it's a paradox. I mean, it's not a paradox, but it's possible that you know, something that is so rooted in our bodies is very hard to describe in terms of language.
That's the problem. You've got to do it.
You know, exactly. And I think we'll bring this to a close, but with me saying that you know, it has been one of the most wonderful kind of areas of work that I think you and I have ever kind of experienced, because you get tremendous. It's a very exciting thing to do. So
it changes people, and it tells you that if you use your body differently and commit yourself to a difference, you will change. I mean, if very simply, if I just shrug, immediately I have a feeling of, I don't care, I don't know. And that's built in. Either it's a cultural or a hardwired, I don't know which, but there are certain, the body evolutionarily was developed to take care of us. So it's like a warning. If a bang went off now, first of all, the body would go, ugh! Then we'd have a feeling of, oh my God, ooh, and then the brain would say, do I fight or do I fly? But the head comes last, and we've become such a head-bound society, Yeah. And you look at people walking around in the street and on buses and on the tubes, and most people look awful. Their bodies are terrible. And then you walk in the park and you look at the dogs running around, and they are beautiful. They know how to use their bodies function. It's just a pleasure. They are, aesthetically beautiful to watch. They're expressive. And then you look at the owners, and of course there's a lot of going to gyms now, building up, but it's not about being all sort of built up and ripped and everything else. That doesn't help. In fact, too much of that locks you. If you build up too many muscles, those muscle builders, they walk around, and that's very unhealthy. So it's having a flexible, open, expressive body. So there we are. Okay.
All right. Well, I think we're going to bring this little chat to an end. And thank you, Mike, for talking about Laban. And we will reconvene. We will reconvene in a minute. Thank you. Thank you for watching. And I hope you enjoyed that chat. And if you did, would you press the like button and also the subscribe button? That would be great. And if you wanted to be given alerts to when the next one is happening, just press the bell button. If you want to put any comments or any questions underneath here, underneath the video, please do. And at some point I will re-interview Mike, as it were, and put some of these questions to him. So I look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you.